Hello, I am DelusionDispeller. Welcome back to our Borderline in Bite-Sized Pieces series. On the last one, I talked about how there are 3 different kinds of resistance you're going to get from the borderline. You're going to get limited resistance, intense resistance, and threats. We're still talking about limited resistance, I believe. No, I'm sorry, intense. And it's intense disagreement, not resistance. But either way, disagreement, resistance, kind of the same thing. So if something happens, you set the limits, and the borderline refuses to abide by them, here's how you handle it. You can change the subject or tell them you're not going to talk about it. You can head out of the room, hang up the phone, cut off the emails, cut off contact, at least temporarily. You can change your phone number. You can change your locks on your house. You can go into your room and close the door. You can require a different person that's outside the situation to be present when you are with the person trying to talk to them. You can stop driving with them. If you're in a car and they start acting up, you can pull the car to the side of the road and let them know this car isn't moving until you can calm down. You can refuse to even drive with them to begin with. You can say a firm no and not change your mind. You can enlist the help of a counselor or a friend. I already talked about that a little bit. Even if the person with borderline doesn't want one. You can call a crisis hotline. You can go to a shelter. You can call the police and get an order of protection or restraining order or an EPO. You can stop seeing them for a while and cut off the relationship completely if you need to. Those are some things you can do if the borderline does not comply to your limits. You can also, if there's children involved, find a different place for the child to be for a time with a different relative or something. You can, and you should, take steps to protect your children from abuse by the borderline, especially if the borderline is overreacting and going into rages and becoming physically dangerous. You can also try to get complete custody of the child. Make sure if there's abuse going on that you report it as well. So realize that the person with borderline is going to perceive all of these things as if you hate them, you're abandoning them, you're rejecting them, you're leaving them, and in some cases you may be leaving them. All you were doing was trying to get the borderline to realize there are limits and they need to abide by those limits, and if they can't, there are consequences. Be consistent. Very important. You cannot keep letting the behavior continue and then say, well, I'm going to leave you, or if you keep doing this, this is going to happen, and then not follow through, because borderlines will notice that. You need to make sure, no matter what, if you are married to or in a relationship with a borderline, that you are seeing a therapist of some kind, because you need to learn how to handle yourself when these types of defense mechanisms kick in. Sometimes the abuse can become very severe and you need to get outside help. Make sure that you consult somebody that's qualified to deal with these type of things. If you sense that you are with a therapist and they're not hearing your concerns, or they're not skilled in dealing with specific issues regarding someone with BPD, then it's time to get a second opinion and find a new therapist. If you need to do things legally, make sure you're doing that. If you need to press charges, do that. You need to do what you need to do. Make sure you stay very well versed in how borderline personality disorder operates in people, especially if you as a child were abused physically, emotionally, sexually, and in other ways, so that you're not overreacting or underreacting to the circumstances, and so that you're prepared when the borderline gives you a response to respond in the best way for the situation. Regardless of what's going on with you, you need all the love, the support that you can get. You need to be able to have your own opinions heard and realized and respected. And obviously, with somebody with BPD, this is more difficult than if they didn't have that. So you need to protect yourself at all measures, at all costs. All right, now here's some things you can ask yourself regarding interaction with a borderline. Did you act as a grown-up person, or did you respond with temper tantrums and childish displays of anger in dealing with them? Did you let them know that you respect yourself and act in ways that respect and honor that self-love? Were you clear with them about where you stand on things? Did you stay focused even if they tried to divert or distract you from whatever it was that you were trying to tell them or do? Did you stay calm? Did you keep a cool head? Or were you flying into a fit of feathers and rage yourself? Did you avoid going in circles with them? That's a big one because borderlines will argue you in circles to the point where you're like, oh my gosh, this is going nowhere. Were you able to deviate from that and get it to go somewhere and have some kind of closure? Were you considerate of their feelings even if they're not being kind to you? Did you keep your reality, your sense of reality, even though the borderline was acting erratic and creating erratic expectations and visions during the conversation? Okay. So you're basically realizing that it's about them and not you. And a lot of times a borderline will tell you that. I'm sorry, this isn't you, it's me. That's a real common borderline phrase. I used to hear that a lot with Robin, the borderline in my life. It's not about you, it's about me. And I used to argue with her, no, if I had done this or done that or blah, blah, blah. Instead of just saying, yeah, you're right, it's about you. Eventually, I did tell her, it's about you, not me. This is your problem, not mine. I don't know how to deal with your mood swings. I don't know how to deal with your erratic behavior that makes no sense to me. I don't understand why you are such a control freak and have to control everybody and everything, including your son's soccer game, which is none of your business. It's the coach's job to coach your kid, not yours to coach the whole team. I didn't understand any of that. And eventually I had to just step away and get out of the relationship because it made no sense to me. And it shouldn't make sense because BPD is a bunch of nonsense. I'm not saying that they don't have it. I'm saying that their actions and their reactions and their controlling and punishing and manipulating and passive aggressiveness and all that stuff that they do is a bunch of nonsense that should not make sense because it's not sensible. So if you're with a BPD and you're kind of beating yourself up saying, why can't I fix this? Why can't I figure this out? Why can't I help them? It's because you can't. You're not a therapist. You're not a clinician. And you're too close to the situation a lot of times to help anybody. So you need to have your own self-respect and self-worth and protect yourself in the situation. The next part of this is going to deal with physical type of things because a lot of times the borderline is raging out physically towards others but also towards themselves. I'm sure you're familiar with self-harm, and if you're not, you will become familiar with it by the time I'm done talking about this. There are things you need to do if a borderline is harming you or themselves. There are steps you need to take, measures you need to enlist, and we'll talk about that on the next video. So I'll see you over there on when the interactions with the borderline become threats. So we went from limited, or not limits, but the reactions to the limits of them being mild to intense. And now we're talking about threatening on the next video. We'll be right back. See you there.